Well, hey everybody. Today is March 27th, and I want to welcome you to this edition of Living Power, your online Bible study, where we are walking through the Bible in a year. We are finishing up the book of Joshua. We're about to start Judges, and I want to congratulate you. We have finished the first quarter of the year already, and I hope you have enjoyed the Bible study. I know I have thoroughly enjoyed kind of facilitating you through it. I hope that I've enlightened you to see some things that you've never seen before. Today we're going to talk about the land apportionments. Before Joshua died, he made sure all the tribes had the part or the spot of land that they were to receive. There were 12 tribes of Israel. And you might need a little bit of a recap as far as the descendants of Joseph. You'll see that in the Bible we're using, the New Living Translation. It talks about the descendants of Joseph, specifically two of the tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. And if you remember at the end of the book of Genesis, before the Israelites came to live in Egypt, Joseph was there, you remember, and during his time there, he spent, I think, 13 years in Egypt, most of it as a prisoner in prison, but he ended up telling Pharaoh's dream, and that got him out of prison, and it was, of course, a divine prophecy that Egypt would have 7 years of plenty, then 7 years of famine, and that they needed to start saving. Well, that saved Egypt and the world because, everyone was in such a famine. Those 7 years of famine were very, very tough, and actually, God ordained that to do two things. First, Joseph rose to power. He became the second most important man in all of Egypt, which is at that time was the second most powerful man in all the world. And he became the regent to Pharaoh himself. And so he became administrator of all of the land. And his family, Joseph's family, which was Jacob and all of his brothers, ended up moving there. And 400 years later, all these descendants, 2 million people or so, were slaves in Egypt. Joseph, while he was there, had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And Joseph did not become one of the 12 tribes, even though he was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, but his two sons became the tribe. And remember, the tribe of Levi did not get land. That's how you end up with the 12 tribes. So, just a little bit of a history lesson. After seeing the map, you might have a few questions. I know I did. I was looking at the map going, well, I wonder why this and why that. So I have 3 questions that I want to answer for you today, and I'm hoping that you maybe had the same question. If you didn't take a look at the map yet, you might want to stop the video and go back and look at that. If you're watching from YouTube, you need to go to my website to see the map at shannonmullins.com. When you get there, you want to click the Bible Study tab, and you will immediately see the lesson for today. Just as a side note also, I always send out the video at 5:30 every morning, but I don't have any control over bottlenecks at certain points for the servers between my server and your server. It goes through a whole bunch of different routers and things. But one day, a couple weeks ago, you didn't receive the email until 11 o'clock. And that was because they had a problem with the server, so the email on their end didn't go out until later. If that ever happens again and you want to see the video and you don't have it in email, you can go directly to my website. You don't have to wait till that email comes. You can go to shannonmullins.com and click the Bible Study tab, and you can watch it directly from there. So that just kind of gives you another option. Okay, here are my questions. How did the people take Jericho so soon when it was in the absolute center of Israel? And the answer to that is they came from the east, because remember, there were 2.5 tribes on the east side of the Jordan that got their land when Moses was leading the people in battle. So they already owned and took over all that land on the east side, and they could easily come in, crossing the Jordan that way, taking Jericho. So that's one answer. The second question that I had when I looked at the map is, why is the territory of Manasseh so large? If you look back at the census numbers, they apportioned the land based on how many men aged 20 and over were in the tribe. Well, Judah had a bigger number than Manasseh, so why is Manasseh getting more property? I think one of the answers to that question is that, remember, there were daughters, there were women who came before Moses, and their father didn't have any sons, so they were going to lose the name, and they weren't going to have any land given to them. So some of the women of that tribe of Manasseh actually got land, and they got land west of the Jordan, which made that tribe so large. So I think that's the answer to that question. And the third question I had, why does Simeon does not have a border? It's in there mixed in with Judah. And I'm not going to answer that question today, but that is actually answered in our reading for tomorrow. So once I found that, I said, well, we'll just wait till tomorrow. In the lesson today, in the reading, you're going to see some whining and some correction today. Did you notice Manasseh was unable to occupy the towns in their area, and they couldn't drive out all the Canaanites? That's in Joshua 17:17. It says later they forced the people to work for them as slaves, but they didn't drive them out. So they come before Joshua and they say, Joshua, we've got a problem. There just isn't enough room in this territory that you've given us, and I got the feeling that they were kind of asking for more, but that's not the solution Joshua provided, was it? Joshua comes back to him and says, well, why do you think you can't drive them out of the land? And the people of Manasseh said, well, they have iron chariots, and they're big, and they're scary, and they're powerful, and we just can't do it. Well, Joshua comes back to him and says, well, you will drive out the Canaanites, even though they are strong, and even though they have iron chariots, because you are numerous, and you are very powerful people. So there. So they went back, and they didn't get any more land, and I guess they had to just drive out the people, and I guess that's what they did. They weren't the only ones with this problem, though, were they? We learned yesterday that Judah couldn't take all of Jerusalem, and the Jebusites continued to live there. In one of my commentaries, it was so funny. It was saying that they couldn't drive out the people, and one of the commentary writers was saying, isn't it funny that the God of Jericho could drive out the people of Jericho, but isn't he the same God of Jerusalem? And couldn't he, if they had called on the name of the Lord, driven out the people in Jerusalem? As if the God of Jericho was not the same God of Jerusalem. Well, anyway, we don't really know. They had trouble doing it, and they didn't drive the people out. Ephraim had the same thing, could not take the town of Gezer. Manasseh had the same problem, and they had a lot of towns in their area that they couldn't drive out the people. The problem was that they came up with a solution that seemed okay with them, but it wasn't what God had intended for them to do. The solution they came up with was to have the people pay tribute to them. Let them stay, but they will pay tribute. Now, where did they get that idea of paying tribute? It was kind of like paying taxes. I'm not sure if it was exactly the same, but kings would do that. Kings, this was probably not a concept that they came up with, for it had been going on for centuries, and it continued for centuries after this time. A king would go in and take over this vassal state, and instead of exiling the people, that wasn't common. Usually they just took over and they made the people pay tribute to them, pay money. I guess it was a kind of a tax, and that was one way that the kings would build their kingdoms, and that's what these people decided to do. So they became their slaves, and the Israelites forced them to pay tribute. That's why I've titled the lesson today, Tribute or Triumph or Tribute, because this was a choice that they made. It was an easier solution. It was more immediate for them, and they saw an opportunity that they could actually make some money. But what they didn't see was the problem that would lie ahead. Of course, God can foresee the problem, but the people did not foresee that the problem was that the people would corrupt them, and then they would eventually turn away from worshiping God. So, if we could only learn to lean on God's guidance and His direction, we would be so much better off, because isn't it so difficult when we're in life, we're trying to make decisions and we don't have all the answers and we can't see everything perfectly clearly, how important it is to always ask the Lord before we make decisions, because He can see our next step and our step after that, and He can see all of the choices all at once, and where they will lead, kind of like this network, this web. He can see all that, and He knows the best solution that will take us to the best outcome. So the question today is, are you going to settle for tribute in your life, or are you going to go for triumph? Do we let things fester in our life? Do we let certain sins kind of hang around that we just really haven't dealt with in our life, and we let them kind of pay us tribute? Or do we wipe them out and try to just deal with those things in our life that we need to deal with? We have to live life with courageous faith, just like Joshua and Caleb did, if we're not going to settle for second best. Because God doesn't want us to settle for second best. He wants us to shoot for His best. So think back over the course of your life. Can you remember a time where you felt God's presence, or you had a problem that you really needed to deal with, and you knew that the Lord helped you through that problem? Consider that the Battle of Jericho in your life. Now, think of a battle or a problem that you're currently facing. That's your Battle of Jerusalem. It looks a lot like the time before when you had a problem and God was with you then, and He helped you through that problem then, and you were victorious, but you're just not so courageous this time. So why not? What's different? What's different about this battle? What makes you think that your God of Jericho can't also be the same God of your Jerusalem today? So, God is a God of change, and He doesn't like us to stay in one place for very long. You are being called to courage, to vanquish those things in life that harm you, and to move forward in partnership with God to greater things in your life that you've never done before. Don't settle on your journey, and I'll remind you of that scripture in Joshua that I love so much. Be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Well, tomorrow we're going to finish the book of Joshua, and then we're going to start the Judges. So I hope this lesson has been a blessing to you. Stay with me. The history books are way exciting, and I know you're going to love it. So, blessings, and I'll see you again tomorrow.